Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike. I'm going to draw page 38 of First Sun and Sword today. So as I draw that, I'm going to do a voiceover and share my techniques and mindset and things like that. The thumbnail. So on the side, on the right, I have a Sharpie little drawing of the actual layout that I want. We have King Croc grabbing Sun in his jaws, Sun struggling, and then a close-up of his flesh getting torn and crushed in the teeth. The dragoness, her reaction and hesitation to engage, and then a sword ends up in King Croc's back and he drops Sun. Now, as this page leaves off, it doesn't look like the sword of the dragoness, and it's not from the angle that she is at. It is actually Sword's short sword that he threw into his back. For you guys, it's like a whole week delay to see what that was, and that cliffhanger might be a little confusing because someone might misunderstand and think, okay, there's a sword in his back, maybe the dragoness did it, and then they would immediately have that confusion resolved on the next page, but without that week delay. So that's just where I chose to leave it. It is not where the script ended necessarily. I'm not sure now at this point, actually. I don't have it in front of me. So sometimes I have something on the script that I will put on the next page because it's not fitting on the current page as I'm actually looking at how to lay it out. So we have the shapes of an actual crocodile, and then we have the shapes that I've been drawing on King Croc. So I have to reference the shapes I've been drawing and the structure I've been drawing, and then the original structure, because it's still challenging to capture the structure. But if I only reference like photos of, or like actual crocodiles, then I'm not going to get the structure right based on what I've drawn so far, because he's not simply a crocodile. He's a creature that I've designed, and I didn't design him well enough, you could say. I mean, he's not so fleshed out and ready to go. Like if I was a character designer and this needed to be 3D modeled, it isn't figured out quite enough for that. But when it comes to drawing a comic, I'm okay with a little bit of unknown and a little bit of like reference work done on each page. I would rather be underprepared for the page than over-prepared, so that I don't take forever to get a comic done, and so that I can practice actually drawing pages more. So that is some discomfort that is comfortable enough to figure that out on each page. So I will, look at prior pages that I've drawn to make sure I'm drawing him somewhat consistently. And here, King Croc hunched over, most of his body's out of the shot. I'm getting the horizon line, vanishing point, building the room around the important action. I started with the important action where I needed that position to kind of central, and then built from there. And then figuring out where I want to put shadows and things like that in the room, which I think I decided against it right there. So at least some of it. So there's an oil lamp, like a bowl of fire, hanging right there at the top left of that panel. And so there could be a shadow underneath it where the bowl is obscuring the fire. And I wasn't sure how much shadow I wanted to put there. So I just reduced it down for now. And in the end, I might eliminate it altogether. We'll see. The pencils are very rough, and I'm going to have to make sense of it in the inks, going straight from rough to inks. So one thing I think I'm seeing is that the more my I guess the more time I put in drawing, and you could say the more comfortable I get, the better I get. But the more time I put in drawing, the more my pencils take on a particular kind of life. Now, that's different than the inks. And people have commented on this before looking at my work. My pencils look different than my inks. Now, I think that's common for most artists. And there is something in the inks for me that is elegant when you simplify down more complicated shapes, but in lines. But if you start in the pencil phase, that's the time to figure out all the problems. That's the time to scribble out, find the shadows, find the lines, build the structures. That's the time to draw in that fashion, and then simplify it down in the inks. And so I can't adjust my pencils too much from what they are, because they're problem solving. They're a tool, and so they're necessary. Now I've also noticed lately the style of my art is changing a little bit, because the pencils are changing so much that it's changing the way I'm able to ink it. And so from the beginning of this comic to now, I see it changing. But that was back in November when I started this, so it has been a while. I typically don't draw a comic for this long. I typically do it over a 1 to 3 month window, and so that might also be why the art doesn't change as much typically on my comics as it is in this comic. So yeah, it's changing. I can't restrict that too much because it's simply a problem-solving endeavor. It's something I need to be kind of in the flow about, and not think too hard about. And that means that the finished product is changing to some degree, and that's okay. So I've been noticing changes happening over the course of this, and sometimes I'll comment in these videos or to my friends that I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I keep seeing it change. I'm not sure what it should look like. Which, just that point is interesting, because I do think there's something nice about being able to imagine and picture the page you're going to make before you make it, and to kind of picture what your world looks like, what your art looks like, so you have this vision you're shooting for. But that's nice, but at the same time, I think we do our best work, and it's the most in the flow, the most creative, most rewarding, when we don't already know what it's going to look like in the end. Like when it is an exploration, the process of making the art itself. And that keeps it interesting and motivating. So yeah, that point, it's nice that it's changing, but at the same time, it has me second guessing and questioning, where am I going? Am I moving too quickly? Am I changing too much? Is this the direction I want to go? Should I rein it in or try this other thing? A lot of that second guessing, I feel is not bothering me right now. Maybe I'm just in a more positive place at the moment, but I feel like if I put the work in, it's going to succeed. I'm going to be moving in a good direction. That any amount of hesitation and thinking about it, is limited in how useful it can be, because it's the actual practice of the daily discipline of in the art and in producing comics that is going to, make things pan out, make things work out. And that's the side I'm erring on now, that it will work out. The animation project I was taking on with Clever Kaiju, it has started. So I got a whole new thing on my plate. The storyboarding and managing different aspects of it, like organizing from the script, art directing, these kind of things. Wow, it's going to be a big endeavor for me to add to my plate. But I've got a good team around me and I know we can do it. But that's going to be interesting too, because I'm going to have to keep doing this, but also be producing commercial art, and storyboards and character designs and so on. And just do that, as a regular part of my practice. Might be good for me, because again, it gets the vision for this project is much more clear, less self-expressive, more commercial, you could say. So I just need to do it, and I think that'll get me out of my head too. So yeah, that's gonna be good. I did want to start doing 2 pages a week. I probably have started drawing 2 a week, but I am not sure if I can do that with this animation project at first, because at first it's going to be mostly me doing the work, like storyboarding, character design, this kind of thing. But then when it gets more into the animation, it'll be more my team that's doing that, because I won't be animating. That's not my forte. So once I get past this first leg of the project in the next few months, then I'll be able to pick up the pace more consistently with this. So we will see if I can release more than one a week or not for now, for the next few months. So going from the thumbnail to this page, this is not a copy of what was on the thumbnail. Not exactly. I'm exaggerating. I'm making a few different choices on this page. So that panel on the left there, the dragoness reaching for her sword, I've got the camera extremely low, so that the sword is very large, and she has her hand like hovering over the sword. So this was what I pictured in my mind, which it's more complicated than a typical pose, because you have the foreshortening, you have the low camera, you have this perspective angle on the form. It's a pretty complex pose and form and camera angle. So I could have just shown her feeling pensive and worried or whatever, just with her face. I chose this because this is kind of what I saw in my mind, is her body language, her hovering her hand over her sword, like she's thinking about like grabbing it and pulling it out, and she just can't quite decide. I feel like that image speaks more strongly than just a face expression could. But the best way to capture that, to me, was this camera angle. And it's more challenging that way. But when I want my stories and my characters to be very expressive, and my storytelling to be very strong, have strong elements of it in it, then I can't shy away from these complex poses and camera angles. And I want to feel free to draw things at any angle like that I need. So that's one of the reasons my penciling style is getting more sketchy, or like in a certain looseness to it, a certain I don't know, like a little more building of the anatomy of the structures, because the poses themselves, the angles themselves, are more complicated. But yeah, I don't know. That's that. I mean, those challenges in the camera angles and stuff is probably part of what's had my style of penciling changing, because it's a lot harder to stay more geometric and simple when you have challenging poses and things to capture. It's actually kind of easier to get more structured and use more ovals and anatomy building to capture those things. Also, I'm trying to get faster at doing pages. I'm already not slow, but I want to get faster at it and to make it the majority of what I do. So instead of figuring out the backgrounds fully and the composition fully on like a thumbnail, I'm trying to figure it out on the page to maximize how much of what I do is on the page. And that creates a more kind of like free-spirited style to the drawings that when I start to throw those things down, if they're not the perfect composition, I just go with it because it isn't pre-planned and I can't be too meticulous with it. And I kind of like that. I like that feel of this was drawn by a human. This is exploratory. And so I'm not shying away from it, but there's lots of things like that and in the drawing that has you very exposed as an artist. Like, I think that's a good thing. You want, when people look at your art, I think that's what you would like is for them to see a human drawing it, to feel like they see that person's hand and that person's eye for things. And if you do that, then you are likely to feel exposed because you're revealing things about yourself. We could say that would be not too sterile of a work of art. Something that has heart, you could say. I just gave you a close look at the pencils so that you could see better how they look close up, see how rough they are, how much isn't figured out yet for the inks. Kind of just a thought that came to me about inking, because that is kind of those final lines, those final details. There's ways of describing this in art that might be different than how I think, which is more like in film or something. But when you think of if things are out of focus, or like if there's a certain focal length, there's a certain depth of the image, of the scene that is in full focus, and then beyond that is going to be a little out of focus, and before it might be too. If you were to have texture on the crocodile's skin or the stone floor, that texture would all fall at roughly the same depth. I mean, depending on how your setup is with a camera, but you would put that all at the same depth. And then in art, they would talk about composition in terms of like grouping. You don't want like little detail marks all over the tree. You might put it in certain spots. And this relates to lighting and things too, because there's going to be portions of things when there's a light source on them and a shadow. There's going to be a portion that has more clear shadow. Like, let's imagine a tree with tree bark. There's going to be maybe like a side that you wouldn't want a lot of detail because it's just, we would consider that very bright. And then in the dark part, there's probably less detail because it's in shadow. There's going to be that middle range that has harder light on it and more depth in the texture of the bark. So basically, I'm just trying to say a little thought about not putting detail everywhere in your panel that relates to camera and things being in focus, but also just different ways of thinking about it. But for me, it helps to think of it in terms of focus on a camera. And so, yeah, I tend to do that. I don't put, if I'm going to put a few pieces of texture on the King Croc's skin, it's going to be in a certain part of the image that's at a certain depth, like a certain distance from the camera, and usually closer to where I want to draw attention as well. Yeah. Yeah, as you can see, much more challenging angles for drawing your figures. Not necessary to the story, but I find to be able to draw it at any angle is going to help with the storytelling, because this is what my mind saw, but in my earlier years of drawing comic books, I would not have drawn it this way. I would have chosen a different angle that I could actually execute. And then you're sacrificing storytelling for what your drawing ability can do, which I'm trying to move further from that. And it doesn't hurt too much, because I mean, people can appreciate a strong composition, which I've been able to do in earlier work, even if I did restrict the camera angles and things. But I'm trying to move towards less restriction, more freedom, because heck, that's, what else do you call getting good at something? What else would you call that than to feel free in your expression in that form? So that's definitely part of my journey, moving towards more freedom of expression in my medium of choice here. Yeah, also we have there's a I guess there's like a sunken part of the floor that they're on right here, and then there's the higher part, so there's a ledge there. What I've done there is I have a shadow on the floor, and it's exaggerated. It's probably a longer shadow than you would get with what light sources I have in this room, but it helps define forms and stuff. But what I'm doing is I'm putting the shadow on the floor, but not on the wall. So technically they're both in shadow. But you could say the primary light source is casting a shadow from the upper ledge onto the floor. But the side of that ledge has secondary light sources that light it up. So that's a problem I see with people that do heavy blacks. They try to do high contrast, just black and white, or just heavy shadows. That if they put everything in shadow without letting some things be lit secondarily, then it starts to remove too many details, and it starts to not appear real, not appear three-dimensional. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say there. Yeah, these are complicated lighting situations, so I'm able to throw shadows basically anywhere I want to, and even the shadow on the floor can be anywhere I want. But I want it to convey form and depth and so on. So I like to be pretty simplistic, like simplified uh, in my style, but that becomes challenging when I want to capture details that I can't otherwise capture. So I want this close up where you don't see very much of King Croc's snout, but I would like it to look like his muscles, his snout, his jaws, that they're biting down, and I would like it to look like Sun's skin is being torn, and that he's being squeezed, and that he's bleeding. It is hard to convey that in a really small panel if you have a very abstract style. And again, I would typically try to use composition, like pre-planning, to be able to make sure things are communicated very clearly. And I would just alter the number of panels, the size of panels, and things like that to make sure it's clear. I'm trying to kind of move away from that I would like sometimes a small panel with detailed information in it. I would like the camera positioned just how I imagine it, and like close in on things where you don't get as many context clues for what you're looking at, and which creates a situation where you need more detail. I want to be able to move that direction, and so I'm kind of putting more detail in lately. It's not just intentional. It's not really intentional at all. It's just the situations I'm putting myself in seem to call for more detail, and so I go with it. I still love a simple, page and style of art, but I also love this free expression. So it's morphing and growing and changing all the time. I wondered how I would get King Croc to bite Sun, and I didn't want Sun's chains to break. I wanted him to still be bound to the floor, and I wanted it to look like he got hurt pretty bad and that he could die, but I couldn't let him get, catastrophically injured or, killed. So how to communicate that, convey that, was a challenge. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Just having King Croc bite down on him in such a way that it's kind of awkward. It just it's on his head, it's on his back and chest and arms. The way that he's just held down to the ground and just gnawed on like a dog that's playing tug of war. I felt like that captured that awful moment pretty well. But it was kind of challenging with Croc is so big too. The scale of him to Sun, it's hard to capture like a whole lot of his body. Even like his face being so long, it's hard to capture his eyes and his mouth and these things in the same panel. Which that's part of why I'm having to make sure things make sense even when the camera's up close. Like add more detail. The shadow on King Croc's head, that is just to help differentiate it from Sun, to make it more clear this is a form, this is a thing here. I didn't need to do it, but I typically do. I'm adding in shadow places, sometimes more than what I inked an outline for. I'm making the best choices I can. So like right there on the neck, I added some more shadow on the neck there because it seemed to define the form better when I just expanded it a bit. I have to be careful with that because the brush lines have a slightly different quality than the Micron ink pen lines. So if I do that very much, it starts to change the style of the line work. but I need to be free to make choices at this phase. The shadow here on her chainmail skirt, the amount of black I put on her belt there, that is all simply because her sword is right there, and I want it to stand out from the background. So throwing more of the background into shadow and like letting that oval shape on the left be black when the oval on the right has more white helps it stand out more. So it's not like I know where the light source is. I know this should be in shadow, so let's put it in shadow. It's more like I need this to be in shadow to help it communicate more clearly. And so let's construct this drawing in such a way that it makes sense that there's a shadow there. Make it believable that it would be in shadow. And if it was in shadow somehow from these multiple light sources, then where would that shadow be? And is it believable? And I tend to do that. I don't like to just completely put things in silhouette without a reason for it. So here I messed up. I put that sidewall in black. I meant to only put the floor in black and let the sidewalls be lit by secondary light. But I went with it, and you'll notice I put a little triangle of black on the side of the stone to the right to indicate the line of shadow, the line of the shadow and of the light coming down from the primary light source there. That was my attempt to help it appear more three-dimensional, even though I already, I didn't follow my original plan, but this helps it look more three-dimensional, as if there's a stronger light source, there that's washing out the secondary light, so much stronger than it that it kind of covers it. So I left a little outline too of the edge so that you could see that three-dimensionality of the stone on the left by leaving a white edge mostly. But yeah, that was, and I went with that. I lived with it. I made it work, but it was actually a mistake. I didn't mean to throw black there. I am just going over things again, double checking where I put shadows. Yeah, you could see on that arm there, I'm adjusting a lot of adjustments here about where I want to put shadow. And the choice of putting more shadow on the ground was just to help the composition of the image, just to help pull him off the background, put more black in the bottom of the panel so that it feels more weighted down, more balanced. Adding a little bit more detail of blood and shadow, pulling out the micron if I need to. This is all part of the feeling free to express myself with my medium and to be able to go between tools, pull out pencils during inking, pull out the micron during the brushing, and to use the brush to make lines as they seem needed at that moment. If I can continue down that path, it's for the best, I think. It will develop into its own, more consistent style that I would have, but it would be more freely expressed. More drawn, hand drawn. More of my fingerprints on it, we could say. And that's my goal. I mean, my goal is I want my fingerprints to be beautiful. I want my fingerprints to be highly valued by people. Not just the intellectual property, the character, the story, or the beauty of the art or something, the perfection of the art. I feel like the it's smarter for me to put to put my place my bets on, or like invest in myself specifically. Because if I, right now I don't do this for a living, but if someday I did, I do not want, I would like to do it on my terms. I would like to make the art the way I want to make it, ways I really enjoy making it. And so if I make choices right now that I don't enjoy, and then I'm doing this 40 plus hours a week later, then I'm not going to enjoy myself very much. So I would rather choose now for myself. Yeah, and again, it's the value added. It's the staying power. Like if my fingerprints are valued specifically, then it's not just it's that someone wants a book because I made it, rather than because they want the book. So that might add to longevity. There is the finished page. Oh no, a few more little adjustments with the whiteout. I thought that was it. There we go, finished page. It is getting grittier, huh? And here's the page with the letters and the color. And it just gets better. I've got a couple pages done after this one. The art is changing even more, and I feel like it's getting even stronger. Yeah, it was definitely influenced by this scene being so dramatic compared to earlier scenes, and so drawn out with action, that it kind of influenced me to draw it in a slightly different way. So I think it's getting closer to what the style of this book is going to be, what it needs to be, like even for the story. So that's going to be good to figure out by the end of this issue, and kind of set me up for success going into the next issue, or the next episode, the next chapter. Well, thanks for watching. Be the practice of your art. Encourage others to do the same. I'll be doing that and staying on top of all my responsibilities over here.